Hello, my name is Michael DeWine Herrick. I'm a psychotherapist and a life coach with over 40 years experience, and I'm currently in private practice in London. This is the 17th video in my series under the title Questioning Woke Psychotherapy. My general intention for this series has been threefold. One, to provide a critique of woke psychotherapy as it is informed by critical social justice theory. Two, to acknowledge its good intentions and attempt to preserve whatever is true and useful within that set of ideas. And three, to offer alternative ways forward that honor the best of woke psychotherapy's intentions. If you genuinely care about this topic, I encourage you to stick with me, as my strongest statements will come toward the end. In this video, I will talk about woke psychotherapy and its critics, including myself, from a moral and ethical perspective. At the heart of the woke perspective and agenda, I believe, is a moral intuition and impulse. According to social psychologist Jonathan Haidt, based on his extensive cross-cultural research, there are 6 foundations for human morality, as follows. Number 1, care versus harm. 2, fairness versus cheating. 3, loyalty versus betrayal. 4, authority versus subversion. 5, sanctity versus degradation. And 6, liberty versus oppression. Although probably all 6 of these come into play in some degree for critical social justice, the most obvious to me are care/harm, fairness/cheating, loyalty/betrayal, and liberty/oppression. As for the good intentions for woke psychotherapy, those who advocate for issues of social justice, I think they're concerned with harm caused to minority groups due to prejudice and seek to provide care. They're also concerned about group disparities and advocate fairness in the form of equity to counter what they perceive as a form of systemic cheating. Toward these ends, they also encourage solidarity and loyalty within marginalized groups as separate from perceived oppressive groups. Finally, they seek to liberate oppressed groups from any and all forms of oppression. Although Haidt doesn't say that all people equally embrace all 6 moral foundations, they are all present in different combinations and to some degree within most cultures. Because of this, most people will resonate to some degree with all 4 of the moral foundations I've just named in relation to critical social justice and their presence in woke psychotherapy. Most of us, whether we agree with woke or not, will resonate with these messages that convey a concern about these issues. I do myself. Generally, at least outwardly, we all want to be seen to care about people who are harmed, to be an ally and an advocate for individuals and groups treated unfairly, and to want freedom for those who are oppressed. While human history provides ample testimony to the fact that these moral orientations have routinely been violated, often in heinous ways, they represent what we like to think about ourselves, at least, if not aspire to. It seems the human psyche and heart contain both the potential for moral virtue and the potential to perpetrate barbaric evil. The often cited Alexander Solzhenitsyn quote is appropriate here. Quote, "If only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds and it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line of dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being, and who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart?" End quote. For each of us, cultivating goodness and containing evil requires learning environments or cultures that support this process, as well as our own individual efforts at introspection, reflection, and aligning our behavior with our moral compass. Because most moral atrocities have been perpetrated against the evil people by people and groups that have morally justified their actions as the best of intentions, it behooves us to pause and really think things through, particularly when our emotions are inflamed and we feel a powerful zeal about our great moral cause. For Haidt, our moral impulses are just that, impulses. They are our immediate reactions to events. They arise prior to thinking anything through. Our moral reasoning comes after the fact to justify our feelings and whatever course of action we may have taken as a result. Haidt acknowledges that to some degree, with mental effort, over time we can shift our moral position, at least a little. Prior to Haidt, the foremost pioneer in moral psychology, who took a developmental perspective, was American psychologist Lawrence Kohlberg. Through his research, he found that people move through 3 stages of their moral development, which he called pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. Each stage has 2 substages, but for the sake of simplicity and time, we could say that pre-conventional answers the question, what is good for me? If it's good for me, then it's good. The conventional stage asks the question, what is good for us? If it is good for my own in-group, my tribe, then it is good. Post-conventional asks the question, what is good for everybody? If it is good for everybody, not just my tribe, then it is good. As an aside, this happens to map quite nicely onto 3 of Robert Kegan's stages of self-development: imperial, interpersonal, and self-authoring. Imperial, basically, is an early stage of development that's narcissistically oriented. What's good for me? Interpersonal is when the center of our identity is social. We want to fit in and follow social rules and for the sake of relationships, and are willing to subordinate our more selfish impulses in service to our group. What's good for us? Self-authoring is when we are able to think and behave more autonomously. We follow our own moral principles, which we have worked out, even if they conflict with group norms. What's good for everyone? Haidt has expressed his view that Kohlberg's model of moral development is a bit wrong-headed because it examines moral reasoning, not actual moral behavior. Remember, for him, reasoning takes place after the fact and is mostly self-justifying. My view is that both Kohlberg and Haidt have made valuable contributions to our understanding of human morality. I see them as complementary, not in opposition to each other. Haidt allows that with effort we can adjust our moral compass. How else but through moral reasoning? While I believe that the vast majority of people who used to call themselves woke, or those who consider themselves social justice activists and advocates, they do have good intentions, rooted in sound moral impulses and intuitions, they have not always thought through their positions or the implications of those positions when operationalized. They have been persuaded by certain narratives, carefully crafted with anecdotes, correlations assumed to be causes, and improbable interpretations of evidence. Alternative narratives, explanations, contrary evidence, and challenges to their positions on various issues are all dismissed or deemed as immoral in intent. I have to remind myself that these are not bad people. In fact, I believe deep down we share very similar moral intuitions. We just have different understandings about what's actually going on in the world and what, if anything, we should do about it. By the way, I do think that there are some at the top of the woke authority hierarchy who are grifters. They're in it for themselves, for their own fame and fortune. They're operating at an imperial and pre-conventional level while posturing at the interpersonal and conventional, or even the post-conventional level. Yet even these people, most of them, I believe, have convinced themselves and their followers that their motivations come from a higher place. As has been theorized, at least since Freud, the best way to lie to others without being caught out is to first deceive oneself. A lie is much more convincing if you believe it yourself. But what about the minions of the social justice authorities? It seems to me that most of the people doing the actual work, the DEI trainings and so forth, are in a conventional stage of moral development. They subscribe to the woke narrative or myth, learn and follow all the rules of conduct and speech, refer to accepted authorities in their field, remain in solidarity to their ideological tribe and the select groups within their moral radar. They start with good moral intuitions and have chosen to enter the fold of the righteous. They have imbibed the ideology, the narrative, the linguistic rules and conventions, and have adopted the right position on a host of issues according to the orthodoxy of the group. This is satisfying in several ways. It validates and provides an avenue or vehicle for expressing one's moral convictions. By association, it broadcasts one's moral virtue socially, avoiding being seen as immoral and on the wrong side of history. It provides an authoritative roadmap through the staggering complexity of the social world and some sense of marching orders. You can even climb the hierarchy and become a recognized authority yourself, passing on your knowledge and basking in the glow of others admiring your virtue. I've put a rather sharp point on this, but don't get me wrong. Developing from pre-conventional to conventional morality is a profoundly important accomplishment and not to be denigrated. However, there's further to go on the moral journey. Again, it is at the conventional stage that most mass atrocities occur. One psychopath can only cause so much damage. It is when large groups of people, brought together under one narrative, one ideology, one religion, one charismatic leader, an unspeakable evil takes place. Conversely, it is also under morally sound post-conventional shared narratives that evil can be mediated. What does it say on the tin of Marxism or fascism or communism? They all promise an ideal social order, equality, fairness for all, well-being, and solidarity for whoever joins the just cause of the in-group. It doesn't say, open and eat this and tens of millions will die, because the bad people will need to be imprisoned, tortured, re-educated, or exterminated. That's what you find out if you naively believe the label and consume the contents. Millions of people have died. Their lost lives could at least be remembered and valued as a caution about embracing a totalising political agenda that can't be questioned, especially when it divides the world into the good people and the bad people. This has never ended well. Remember, post-conventional is about all of us. Another moral dimension to all of this is the responsibility that comes with being able to see past the label on the tin of woke. Will we choose to be merely seen as moral through insincere compliance or at least silence, and so avoid ostracization and being branded as a far-right bigot? Or will we speak up and remain true to our deeper moral intuitions and convictions? It's interesting to me that Haidt doesn't identify truth-telling as one of his moral foundations. Did he just not find that this is a universally held moral position? While some of us hold truths that are counter to woke assertions and may have a moral dilemma about expressing these truths, I think maybe the woke could add truth-telling to their moral repertoire. If you have to deny truths or even lie in order to advance your own moral vision and agenda, how moral are you, really? Having said all of this, I want to affirm that it is a good thing that people imagine ideal social realities, even utopias. What is needed, however, is a social discourse about whatever utopian vision is on offer. This also ought to include a full recognition of the consequences of historical utopian projects, particularly when what is on offer resembles catastrophic ones that have come before. And if your utopian vision requires a revolution that deconstructs, dismantles, and destroys the foundations of the current system that doesn't work as well as you wish it would, you damn well better have solid evidence and reason to believe that what you would build with the rubble would be better and actually possible, and an estimate of what the cost would be in every dimension that has value. But now let's narrow this down to see how it applies to the moral dimensions of psychotherapy. Every governing and accrediting body for counseling and psychotherapy provides a code of ethics that it expects all of its practicing members to abide by. While morality is a set of values and principles that guide an individual's sense of right and wrong, ethics deals with how these values can be applied in a broader social or professional context, like psychotherapy. I've asked ChatGPT about what common ethical standards for psychotherapy might say, quote, about therapists using their practice to further their own social justice agenda and activism. I could do an entire video on the dangers of ChatGPT and why and how to be careful about using it. But its response to this question seemed quite reasonable and lines up with my own thinking, so I'll share what it had to say. It identifies the following ethical issues. Conflict of interest. Quote, using therapy as a platform for personal social justice activism could be seen as a conflict of interest if it interferes with a therapist's primary role as a neutral and supportive mental health professional. Point number 2, client autonomy and values. Quote, therapists are generally expected to respect and support their clients' values and autonomy. Imposing personal social justice beliefs on clients can be seen as a violation of this principle. The next one, cultural competence. Quote, ethical guidelines emphasize the importance of recognizing and respecting diverse values and beliefs. Therapists should be able to work with clients who hold differing social and political views without imposing their own agenda. Next, informed consent. Quote, it is essential to inform the client of the therapist's approach and any potential overlaps with social justice activism before therapy begins. Next, professional boundaries. Quote, using therapy as a platform for social justice activism can blur professional boundaries. And now, beneficence and non-malfeasance. Therapists should act in the best interests of their clients and avoid causing harm. If a therapist's activism negatively affects a client's well-being or the therapeutic relationship, it could be considered an ethical violation. End quote. I'll add to that I think encouraging victim mentality and de-emphasizing personal agency just might be a bad outcome. ChatGPT ends with this statement, quote, while therapists have a right to engage in social activism in their personal lives, they must ensure that it does not compromise their ethical responsibilities to their clients. It seems to me that the training in and the practice of psychotherapy has increasingly become a covert operation in social activism, flying under the radar of common ethical standards by wearing the disguise of cultural competence. As it's gained power, it has become bolder in explicitly declaring its social activist intentions. Those in charge of regulating the field and training therapists are so passionately committed to their cause that they have not stopped to contemplate the ethical implications of their proposed ideas and practices. Again, as most moral atrocities have been perpetrated by those who justify their actions on moral grounds and good intentions, it's important to pause and scrutinize the moral and ethical implications and likely outcomes for actions motivated by passionate moral convictions. It's not that they are necessarily wrong just because they are so strongly felt, but they might be. And if they do not submit to questioning, as the woke seem unwilling to do, they are very likely to go wrong. As just one example, I believe in time we will come to recognize the tragic consequences of our hasty embrace of gender-affirming care for children. We may need more longitudinal evidence before enough people wake up, but I believe the time will come. Then we will wish we had checked our moral zeal on the issue and paid more attention to evidence and alternative ways of working with gender dysphoria. For far too many, it will be too late. Now I ask you to reflect on this. Following the atrocities of the Hamas attack on Israeli civilians on October 7th, student groups at 51 universities, including Harvard, Yale, and Stanford, signed a letter in support of Hamas, saying they, quote, hold the Israeli regime entirely responsible for all unfolding violence. As well, hundreds of thousands have gathered in cities around the world, including the U.S., Europe, and Australia. where protesters chanted "Gas the Jews" outside the Royal Opera House in Sydney. What's going on? Some are saying that the far left overlooks anti-Semitism because Jewish people are considered white, or perhaps at least white adjacent. And since you can't be racist against white people, you can't be racist against Jews. Add to that the perception and argument that Israelis are a colonizing group in the region rather than a people with an historical right to be there, moral outrage against them is justified, apparently excusing the slaughter of civilians, including babies and children. Where does this go? The students who signed letters have since apologized and retracted after strong pushback against their statement. Was this sincere? I don't know, but I doubt it. And these students will graduate, enter society, and occupy positions of power. What impact will they have? One can only imagine. Following the death of George Floyd, we had riots and cities were set on fire and looted, based on the assertion that black people are disproportionately killed by police. This despite the research of black Harvard economist Roland Fryer, who showed that the claim is not true. This despite the lack of any real evidence that Derek Chauvin acted out of racial animosity. This despite the coroner's report that there was no sign of injury to Floyd's neck and that asphyxiation was not the cause of his death. Meanwhile, decolonizing psychotherapy, cleansing it of any theory or praxis that has been contributed by white people, is all the rage, so to speak. Where is this going? What forms of violence, even if not physical, will be justified on this crusade? Is it not time to slow down and think things through based on evidence and reason? Instead of allowing anecdotes and conjecture woven into a totalising narrative to fuel our ideological zeal? How much damage will have to be done before we question our justifications for violence based on misguided moral outrage? This series on questioning woke psychotherapy is my attempt to slow things down, look around, and ask critical questions. The field seems to be rushing to leap off of a cliff like a horde of lemmings. I hope that it's not too late to change course. If you feel as I do, then I encourage you to find some way to speak up. Well, thanks for watching this and sticking with me to the end. If you like this video, please give it a like, subscribe to my channel, click the bell for notifications, leave me a comment, and share it with a friend. And please, join me for my next video. As I'm trying to grow this channel, your support is greatly appreciated. Until next time, take care of yourself and each other. Bye for now.